This right here are the best iPhone camera settings you should use to take photos and videos with your new iPhone 16. More specifically, these are all of the adjustments you need to make to go from results that look like this to results that look like this. But anyways, that being said, let's begin by tapping on the settings icon, then coming down here to the camera subsection, and then tapping on record video. Now, as you can see, we have options that range from 720p all the way up to 4K at 60 FPS. But if what you're looking for is visual quality, I suggest you leave it at 4K 24 or at 4K 30. Mainly because even though it is a very small difference, when you record video at 4K 60, since you have double the frames, there is a lot less information per frame, resulting in a slightly less quality video, as you can see in the side-by-side I'm showing you right now. Now, a little bit below, you'll find the option for enhanced stabilization, which I always recommend you leave on because it barely has a dent on visual quality, unless you're going to use your iPhone with a tripod. If that's the case, then turn it off because you're going to get a little bit better quality video. And since the phone is on a tripod, you won't really need any stabilization. Now, as you can see a little bit below, we have HDR video, which only works with high efficiency video, which we'll take a look at later. And it's an option that I recommend you turn on or off depending on what you're doing. Generally speaking, I always recommend you leave it off, but sometimes you are going to record things with a high dynamic range, like in this case, a shot where you can see the sky in a hot sunny day. In those cases, I would recommend you turn on HDR, which is high dynamic range video, because as you can see, it's going to get you a little bit better results, mainly because it is going to expose for the shadows and the highlights a lot better than you would if you didn't have the option enabled. Now, a little bit below, you have the option to lock the camera, which is going to prohibit the phone from automatically switching between the lenses while you are recording video. So I always recommend you lock the camera so you always shoot with the desired lens and you get the desired visual quality. And of course, that also applies to the white balance. I also recommend you lock your white balance so the phone is not automatically switching it as you record the video. As you can see, it can actually make a really big difference in the colors and tones of your video when you have it locked as opposed to when you don't. But anyways, that said, let's come back here to the main camera settings and tap on record slow-mo video, which I always recommend you switch to 1080p at 240 FPS. It is for some reason going to default at 720p, 240. I'm not really sure why. Then come back here to the main camera settings and do the same with cinematic video, which once again, for some reason is going to default to 1080p HD. And you should, of course, switch it up to 4K at 24 or 4K at 30 FPS. Either way, it should be at 4K. Then very, very important here on record sound, you should switch spatial audio to stereo. By default, every new iPhone 16 and 16 Pro is going to enable spatial audio, which is technically going to give you a more immersive experience, but it is impossible to play back in devices that are not made by Apple. So if you plan on editing your videos or sending your videos to other devices like your computer or your TV, then switch it up to stereo and the file is going to be a lot easier to play back and it's not going to give you any issues. And well, that said, a quick tip, if you want the best audio quality possible, disable wind noise reduction, which is going to reduce the wind noise, but also at the expense of reducing the audio quality. So if you want professional sounding audio, turn this feature off. Now back here on the main camera settings, let's tap on formats. As you can see, we can choose between high efficiency and most compatible. In this case, high efficiency, like the name suggests, is going to give you a smaller file, more efficient, but also of a little bit less quality because it's more compressed. And then more compatible is going to give you a bigger file, so it's going to be more taxing on your storage, but it's also going to have slightly better visual quality. Now below we can find photo mode, so we can switch between 12 megapixels and 24. I think by default it will always be at 24, and that's what you should leave it at because it's going to give you sharper images. But I always recommend you also turn on resolution control right here, so you can switch it up to 48 megapixels on the camera app and get the sharpest image quality possible. As you can see right here, if the feature is turned off and then we access the camera app, there is no mode or option to change the resolution. So we are stuck with either 12 or 24, depending on what we chose on the camera settings. But on the other hand, if we enable resolution control right here, there will be an option, there it is, JPEG Max, that we can turn on or off to access those 48 megapixels and get the best image quality possible on this phone. But anyways, that being said, let's come back here to the main camera settings and tap on Preserve Settings right here. This is an option that will let you preserve the camera settings after you close the app, so when you come back, the camera is set up exactly where you left it the last time you used it. Now, of course, the easy way to use Preserve Settings is to turn everything on right here, so everything stays the same compared to the last time you used the camera. But I found the only necessary toggles to turn on are Camera Mode, Photographic Style, Creative Controls, Exposure Adjustment, Portrait Zoom, Resolution Control, and Live Photo. If you turn these settings on, pretty much everything you do to your camera will be saved, and you won't have to set everything up again if you leave the camera or if you close it from the multitasking. Now, if you use your camera app relatively often, I highly recommend you turn these options on, because if not, they will reset every time you leave your camera app, and you don't even have to close it. If you just do this and swipe back to the home page, all of the settings will be defaulted back to normal every single time. So I highly recommend you do this so that doesn't happen. Now back here on the main camera settings, I also recommend you turn on Use Volume Up for Burst, which, like the name suggests, is going to let you create a burst of photos by tapping on the volume up button, like that. Then I also recommend you turn on Scan QR Codes. I also recommend you turn on Show Detected Text, a very, very interesting feature. As you can see, when the feature is turned on, you can actually copy text from an image and turn it into digital text to then send it to someone through messages or copy it into a note. It is very interesting. Now down here, I also recommend you turn on the grid and the level, which are going to give you a lot of control over the composition of your images and videos. I'm not really sure if you can see it, but the level is basically this line right here that will let you compose a completely vertical or completely horizontal shot. And then as you can see, the grid lines are these lines dividing the display in 9 squares that help you better compose your shots. Usually the basic rules for photography is that if you're taking a picture of a main subject, it should be in the middle square. And if you are taking a picture of something in context of something else, then it should be between two of these squares. So either between the middle one and the right one, or between the middle one and the left one. In this case, as I said, if the object is in context to something else. Then down here, you also have the option to mirror the front camera, which is going to invert the video, so you don't get that issue where your pictures and videos look sort of inverted as opposed to what you see in the mirror. If you turn this on, it will look exactly the same as it looks in the mirror. Then down here, I also recommend you turn on lens correction, which is going to correct the lens distortion on the front and ultra-wide cameras, especially the ultra-wide camera, so they look more professional because they tend to distort a lot, especially on the edges. And then you have macro control, which is an option that lets you automatically switch to the macro mode on the camera, but I recommend you turn it off right here because it can accidentally be triggered, ruining your videos or photos if you are trying to get professional results. Now that said, when it comes to the camera app, there's not much to say since everything is meant to be used automatically, but there's one setting I always recommend you change, and it's right here at the top right on the photographic styles menu. As you can see on the iPhone 16, we have a range of different photographic styles or filters that will give your pictures and videos a specific look. Now, the problem, of course, like with pretty much every filter, is that they tend to look too obvious, too gimmicky, and therefore they look less professional. Now, this doesn't mean that filters are not a good idea. They are great to give your pictures a specific vibe, but they have to be used with moderation. So as you can see with the iPhone 16 and pretty much every iPhone with photographic styles, you get this little slider at the bottom to regulate the intensity of the filter. As you can see, if you switch it all the way down, it's going to apply nothing. It is going to go back to normal. And then if you switch it all the way up, it is going to apply the filter at full intensity, full effect on the filter. And of course, as I said, that is not going to give you very professional results most of the time. So what I usually recommend is that you leave it somewhere in the middle, ideally, so it has a more subtle effect on that filter. This, of course, will not apply to every picture in the same way. Sometimes you want a slightly more obvious effect. Sometimes you want it to be a little less obvious. But ideally, if you want consistent, good results when using these photographic styles, I recommend you leave the option or the intensity of the filter right in the middle. And well, as a last bonus tip for everybody that doesn't really enjoy the camera control on the iPhone 16, me included, there is a very interesting option here called Clean Preview, which if you turn it on and then you tap on the camera control button, is basically going to get rid of your touch controls on the phone. So you can only control the camera using the camera control button. And of course, that is not very convenient, especially when you press the button on accident, which, as many of you know, happens very often. So I recommend you come here to the camera settings and disable Clean Preview. So even if you accidentally tap on the camera control, your touch controls still work and you can just still use your phone as you normally would, even if you accidentally press on the button, which, as I said, will happen very often. But anyways, that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any questions about the settings or tips that I gave in this video, please tell me in the comments. And I hope to see you again in a new video.